In the middle of their bye week, the Seahawks look to be on the hunt for tight end depth. What does it say about Noah Fant's status moving forward and potential players who could be joining the roster or the practice squad? We'll be breaking it all down here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks.
You are Locked On Seahawks, your daily Seattle Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Greetings, 12. This is Corbin Smith, the host of the Locked On Seahawks podcast, your daily Seahawks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang, as always. And a special thanks to all the 12s out there for tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it, whether you're tuning in nearby Issaquah, Washington, or if you are over in Peoria, Illinois. We appreciate each and every one of you. The Seahawks in the middle of their bye week, no games to prepare for this week, but that doesn't mean that there is work not going on at the VMAC. 4 players coming in for tryouts today. We're going to investigate what that might mean for the Seahawks coming out of their bye week. Plus, we've got our midseason awards on defense, and we'll be taking a look at what scheme and personnel changes might be brewing this week after Seahawks coaches, Mike Macdonald included, take a deep dive into the film and do some soul searching as they try to get their season rolling. This episode is brought your way by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use the code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Now for your lead story here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Noah Fant suffered a groin injury during practice last Wednesday and ended up not playing in Sunday's loss to the Los Angeles Rams. Now it looks like there's a chance that he might be out quite a bit longer than just that one game. The Seahawks today bringing in 4 players, all tight ends, 4 workouts. Now at this point, none of them have been signed, and this happens during the season. You take a look at players, doesn't necessarily mean they're going to be signing. But the fact, Rob, that it was all tight ends, that suggests to me that the Seahawks may have some concerns beyond this bye week when they are going to get Noah Fant back, especially when you consider some of the types of players that they brought in to work out, including former first-round pick and converted receiver to tight end N'Keal Harry.
Yeah, that's the thing, is that the style of tight ends that Seattle was bringing in does lend you to believe that perhaps Noah Fant's injury is a little bit more serious than had been previously reported. Look, I would argue that A.J. Barner, who has been pretty solid for the Seahawks, but it has not been a dominant run blocker that was expected, and Pharaoh Brown, who was billed as a top blocker, but has also been just, I would say, average at this point. Certainly has been very productive in the passing game. If that is a possibility that Seattle is going to get Noah Fant back, and they are just looking to kind of kick the tires on some other tight ends. But again, when you consider the fact that the headliner of this group, and I'm going to mention all 4 of them here in a moment, but that the headliner of the group is a converted wide receiver, then again, it suggests that the Seattle is looking to get a tight end who might be able to be more of a seam threat rather than a people pusher at the line of scrimmage. Those 4 tight ends, you mentioned N'Keal Harry, former first-round selection of the New England Patriots a few years ago. He was a wide receiver at Arizona State, but at 6'3", 6'3", 225 pounds when he was drafted, and who knows what his frame is at this point, then he again is going to be a little bit undersized compared to most tight ends. They also have brought in a player in Tyree Jackson, a converted quarterback actually from the University of who spent some time with the Buffalo Bulls as well as the Buffalo Bills. And so he is much bigger. He's 6'7", 245 pounds. So he has the height, but still is not known for his physicality in the running game as much as his size, speed combination, and he can catch the ball pretty well. Trey McKitty, 6'3", 245 pounder, that has spent some time with the Chargers, and last was with those same Buffalo Bills. He's an interesting player. He's a former 3rd-round pick himself. Tyree Jackson was not drafted at all. And then finally Garrett Prince, who at 6'3", 245 pounds, is 6'5", 240 pounds, is a little bit more of the traditional all-around tight end. He can catch the ball. He also can be a little bit more of a run blocker, but like Tyree Jackson, was not actually drafted into the league, made a squad, was an undrafted free agent with the Jacksonville Jaguars, was on the time on their practice squad, as well as the active roster, and last was with the Kansas City Chiefs. So again, Seattle is kind of kicking the tires on some players who look like they might be able to be fits for this squad. And I don't think that you're going to get a superstar at this point in the game, but these are our players who have some success in the NFL.
The one, obviously, that is the most fascinating is N'Keal Harry. And look, this, I will admit, this is one of my biggest misses as a draft scout. N'Keal Harry was a player that I absolutely loved coming out of Arizona State. Now, looking back in hindsight, there were some issues with him creating separation at the college level, and that has been a big problem in the NFL. But still, I thought with his size and his catch radius, his physicality, I thought for sure that N'Keal Harry was going to be an absolute superstar in New England. And I thought he and Tom Brady were going to hit it off. None of that ended up happening. And he's barely got 60 catches in his entire career. Last year, he didn't make a single catch for the Minnesota Vikings and played in 6 games, barely played on offense. And this spring, they moved N'Keal Harry from receiver to tight end. So this is a new transition. It's not like he played tight end for a couple years now. He is still learning this position. But I look at Ryan Grubb's offense and the way that he has used tight ends in the past, and I'm thinking about Jack Westover. I could see N'Keal Harry being somebody that you kick the tires on, you put him in the practice squad and just see, is there a way that we can put those receiver skills and that athleticism into Ryan Grubb's offense and make him somebody that could, by the end of the season, could be making an impact potentially for you. Or maybe in a couple of weeks, you could get him some plays where he's going to at least give you a guy that can stretch seams a little bit. But to this point, his career has been an absolute disappointment. And again, it bums me out because the guy that I absolutely love coming out of Arizona State, he was picked an entire round before the Seahawks got DK Metcalf in the same draft. So obviously Seattle got a far better deal. And it's funny that the Patriots are the team that traded down so that the Seahawks could move up to get DK Metcalf. But in the end, N'Keal Harry hasn't done anything close to what Metcalf has done in the NFL. He's bounced around with 3 teams, but that is still an intriguing guy that's only 26 years old. I think you take a look at him close. Maybe he worked out okay. Maybe you bring him in on your practice squad. And as for the other couple of tight ends, Prince is a player that hasn't played in a regular season game to this point with the Jaguars or the Chiefs. That would be the one that I think would be least likely to be added. McKitty was a player that I liked quite a bit coming out of Georgia. I had him as a day 3 guy, though, and he was picked in the 3rd round. Just didn't work out for him with the Chargers. Another guy that's got some pass-catching ability that didn't necessarily translate to the NFL. And then Tyree Jackson, just the size and the fact that this is the guy that had a touchdown his rookie season with the Eagles, and he had just moved over to the tight end position. He has shown some flashes, but he's also had injuries. That's been the biggest detriment for him. He's been banged up. But another guy that fascinates because he was a converted player from quarterback to tight end. He's obviously got a high football IQ from playing quarterback before. So that could be a possibility too. I don't know that any of these players are going to be signing with the Seahawks, but this is just me from a scout perspective. Like, I'm never going to be able to completely give up on N'Keal Harry. I just think that the guy has incredible skills and it just has not translated. I'm always fascinated by a big-bodied receiver that moves to tight end in today's NFL and in Ryan Grubb's offense. That would be the one that I would bank on. Maybe you might be able to find a diamond in the rough there because we know the talent has been there. He just has not been able to produce in the NFL.
Yeah, that's very well said. I think that the way you articulated that with all 4 players is pretty much spot on. N'Keal Harry does feel like the player that has the highest upside. You talked about his athletic ability. 6'3", 225 pounds when the Patriots selected him in the first round. And he ran a 4.53 in the 40-yard dash. He had a 38.5-inch vertical jump. In terms of his power, he had 27 repetitions despite having 33-inch arms. That's an incredible arm length and bench press number there that really speaks to his physicality and his time in the weight room. Now, as you said, he was not asked to be a tight end and a blocker much, but at the same time, he was very effective on special teams. I got an opportunity to kind of watch his special teams tape, and you see the power, you see the the desire as a blocker. So I was encouraged by that. And again, as I mentioned before, with the athletic numbers, I remember N'Keal Harry not only as a wide receiver, but also as a punt returner. He actually had a punt return for a touchdown against USC years ago. So again, we're talking about a guy who's a pretty darn dynamic athlete. Does he have the desire to remain more of a blocker? And that, of course, is going to be one of the questions here. And as you said, he's 26 years old currently. He does turn 27 in December, however. Tyree Jackson, really quickly, he also is a dynamic athlete. Talking about guys who have some upside to him. 6'7", 249 pounds. When he came into the league, he was a quarterback at the University of Buffalo and had a lot of success there statistically. He was the Senior Bowl MVP. But at the same time, he was a guy that was not drafted, wound up making his undrafted free agent, flashed a little bit. 6'7". I mean, this is a long striding guy. He doesn't change directions that well. And I do have some reservations about whether he has the power, the physicality you're looking for as a blocker, but he can pluck the football. And again, he just has some unique size to him. 4.59 in the 40-yard dash at 250 pounds is absolutely smoking. So again, he is another intriguing player. And then Trey McKitty, again, one of the things I like about him is that he does provide a little bit of pop. He can't snatch the football out of the air, but there are just so many hits and misses with him. You see some splashy plays on tape, and then you see some moments where it just feels like he's making a mental error. And I don't know that that's something that the Seahawks can afford at this point. I think the Garrett Prince is probably the most well-rounded tight end of the bunch, but he also feels like, and he's the oldest, well into his 27th year, it also feels like he lacks the upside that the Seahawks would be looking for at this point.
We'll see if Seattle ends up signing any of these players. Sometimes they wait a couple days, especially in a bye week, to see where things are at. But the fact they worked out 4 tight ends does suggest to me that they have some serious concerns about Noah Fant, at least for a couple weeks, his availability, and they're looking to see if they can find somebody else to add to that position group. When we come back, Mike Macdonald said on Monday that everything is on the table in terms of evaluation. Rob and I are going to be discussing and debating what we think that means for the Seahawks and what we expect to see as far as potential changes on scheme, personnel, and much more. That's coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. PrizePicks is America's #1 daily fantasy sports app with over 5 million active members. PrizePicks is the easiest, most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. And unlike other apps on PrizePicks, it's just you against the numbers. PrizePicks is the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy, so your lineups always stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. If you have a player that leaves in the first half and doesn't return, PrizePicks keeps your lineup live. PrizePicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks didn't hit. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. Download the PrizePicks app today and use the code LOCKEDONNFL and get $50 instantly when you play $5. That's the code LOCKEDONNFL on PrizePicks to get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks, run your game. Seahawk fans, remember our great partner, Ultimate Pro Football GM? Well, they're back and they've added an exciting new game mode that I want to tell you about. The game has you step into the shoes of a football franchise GM and lead it to glory. Now you have a head coach career mode as well. So on top of getting your dynasty built by drafting players, signing free agents, and hiring coaching staff, now you also get to call offensive plays during games as well. You'll tools you can work with, such as individual training camps and upgraded negotiation systems. So this fun and realistic game just got even better. If you already have it installed, be sure to do an update so you can try out the new mode. If you don't have it yet, download it right now. It's a must-have for football fans. I love it, and I know you will too. Ultimate Football GM is completely free, has no ads, and 100% playable offline. Again, that's Ultimate Pro Football GM. Play on the go as you want and when you want to. And here's a special offer for Locked On fans. Use the promo Locked On NFL, all caps, inside the game store to receive a free boost to your franchise. Make sure to get it, as this perk will jumpstart your play and give you the advantage you'll want in creating a dynasty. To download the game, just visit ultimate-gm.com. That's ultimate-gm.com, or look it up in the app stores. Ultimate Pro Football GM. Start your dynasty today. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. It's your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be joined, as always, by my co-host in crime, Rob Morang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. Thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. Mike Macdonald on Monday, as you would expect, going into a bye week after losing 5 out of 6 games, said everything is on the table when it comes to evaluation and assessment, whether it's scheme, personnel, and a bunch of other different factors. They are combing through everything, trying to figure out how they can get this ship steered back in the right direction in the second half of the season. And Rob, it's interesting because, reading between the tea leaves, there's a lot of other things that Macdonald said that kind of tied into this the other day. But one thing that really stood out to me was the commentary when Macdonald was asked about why Christian Haynes did not suit up on Sunday. Not only was he not starting or rotating into the lineup at all, he didn't even dress for the game. So he went from being in a platoon to not even being in uniform, even though he was healthy. And Mike Macdonald made it clear that he's still going to have more opportunities ahead of him, but he also finished up, and I loved the quote at the end. Basically, he said, and this is not word for word, but what he said is, if you get the job done in practice, you're going to get your chances. But if you take a step back, you have to be accountable. And those last couple of words really stuck with me, especially when you consider how it does look like Mike Macdonald is backing up his words when he says, I am going to reward guys that earn opportunities in practice. We are seeing it on offense and defense, and I expect that's only going to escalate coming out of the bye. They're not winning games. If guys are preventing them from winning games by making mistakes consistently, he's going to find guys that are going to do their job correctly, whether they're coming off the practice squad or if they're backups that are getting a chance to start. There's going to be some mixing and matching to find that right formula.
Yeah, there's no question about it. I mean, just the fact that that we see guys like Cody White on offense, where we're seeing players like Josh Jobe on defense that, began their journey in 2024 with the Seahawks on the practice squad, or not even on the roster in the first place, and yet have now carved out spots on Seattle's game day roster. So for Christian Haynes, a prized draft pick to not be on their game day roster, be a healthy scratch was a stunner. But I love the fact that that when Mike Macdonald was asked about this, that he kind of acknowledged the positional versatility of Olu Oluwatimi, who has played some tight end for the Seahawks and kind of a move fullback, and Jalen Sundell as well. But then kind of mentioned that Christian Haynes he suggested at least that Christian Haynes needed to kind of just lock in a little bit more, be a little bit better prepared during the practice week if you want to play on game day. So I think that's an interesting one. But it is, I love that you mentioned Christian Haynes to kind of start off this conversation about the possibilities of what Seattle might be doing as far as changes. I do think that Christian Haynes is drafted early enough. He certainly looked pro ready when he started 4 consecutive years at right guard at University of Connecticut and was a standout at the Senior Bowl as well. And clearly Anthony Bradford has had his issues with the Seahawks at this point. I'm not necessarily advocating for Christian Haynes to get the start at right guard in the next game against the San Francisco 49ers, because Seahawks fans know all too well how fearsome that defensive front is for San Francisco. However, I do think that there has to be some type of an opportunity for Haynes to just be with the ones and get his opportunity. Perhaps he is one of those players, just like Bradford is, that has in the past kind of stepped up his game when he actually had an opportunity opportunity to play in the game itself, rather than having Anthony Bradford kind of waiting on the sideline to take over his spot should there be any mistake. So I do think that that is something that the Seahawks should do, is consider a game that might be a little bit of a soft landing where you can get Christian Haynes into that starting lineup. But of course, the young man has to prove that he is up to that challenge by having a strong week of practice. So that is one of the ones that I think that we should be talking about here. I also think that the Cody White, frankly, what he was able to do, that he deserves more playing time. And if that means less Bobo, hey, then it means less Bobo, because he is struggling to get open, and Cody White was getting himself open. 2023, as impressive as it was for Jake Bobo, is not 2024. And so, again, I think you have to reward the players who are actually making plays. I think the same thing here with the rookie tight end, A.J. Barner. Look, if that means less playing time for Pharaoh Brown, fine. If that means that Noah Fant is going to be, put on IR, as we talked about a couple of moments ago, I think that's got to be that has to be a consideration as well. And finally, going back to defense, I mentioned Josh Jobe. Again, I think that you absolutely have to bring him to your active roster. He is out of these call-up opportunities, having been active now for a couple of games. So if that means that he has to be signed to the active roster, then do so. And if that means or Cameron Young is put on IR, or perhaps even a player is released, I think that Josh Jobe's play absolutely forces the Seahawks' hands here. You got to get him onto the field.
Yeah, you said that you wanted a soft landing spot for Christian Haynes. I'm not even going to say that. Look, I watched what Anthony Bradford did against the Rams and Braden Fisk this last weekend.
Yep.
That was the worst I've seen him play. And I don't like saying it this way, but that's saying something. We have seen some bad games from Anthony Bradford. He has endured a lot of adversity in the starting lineup. And young players, that tends to happen. But we're not seeing a player that's getting better. I don't see a guy that earned a starting job, to be honest with you. I haven't seen that this year. Christian Haynes has been inconsistent, but when he's had his chances, I wrote an article about this a month and a half ago. I thought they should give him a chance to start 6 weeks ago, and it never happened. And yeah, it could be the practice stuff. That may very well be what's going on here. But look, at some point, you got to say, this guy is not getting the job done. We just watched Geno Smith have less than a second in the pocket multiple times because Anthony Bradford was just getting dominated by Braden Fisk or Kobe Turner. He just could not win those battles. And San Francisco is going to be throwing some pretty darn good defensive tackles at him in that game too. So I'm in a different stratosphere than you. I don't care what the comments were. Like, what you do is you talk to the kid and you say, look, we're going to give you a chance. If you practice well this week, you are starting, and get him in the lineup and see what he can do. He can't be any worse than what we saw that last game. And that's just an honest assessment. As far as the other positions go, Kobe Bryant needs to stay in the starting lineup. Whenever Rayshon Jenkins gets back, they can do 3 safety looks. But Kobe Bryant's got to play. That play that he made at the end of regulation, I don't want to compare him to Earl Thomas because he's not the same athlete. But that looked, if you would have put a number 29 jersey on him, I would have said, is that Earl Thomas? Because he just shot out of center field and decked Demarcus Robinson. And it was a clean hit. They flagged it initially, but they picked the flag up because rightfully so. That was a phenomenal, that's teaching tape, how to play physical football as a free safety in today's NFL with the rules. I just think Kobe Bryant looks like he is in his comfort zone at free safety. And Josh Jobe, as you mentioned, Josh Jobe, look, not only does he need to be on the roster, he needs to be your starter. I'm going to go as far as saying he should be your starter at the other cornerback spot for the rest of the season. Look, Trey Brown, before his ankle injury a couple weeks ago, was not playing good football. His passer rating against is north of 130. He's had issues giving up big plays. He's had multiple penalties on him to this point. And since he exited the lineup, Josh Jobe, just some rankings on Pro Football Focus, and this is stats, this is not grades. He has a 46 passer rating against, which is in the top 5 for corners with over 100 snaps. So he's got a big enough sample size now that I think is justified to discuss this. He is in the top 15 for forced incompletion percentage. He's got 3 pass breakups and an interception in 3 starts. He gets his hands on the football. He's playing a lot of sticky coverage. I thought he's done a nice job, I think he's done a nice job making plays in the run game too. And the other thing that stands out, he is in the top 5 in completion percentage against for qualified cornerbacks. I mean, you go across the board. He gave up a few big plays in the Bills game, but I think this kid is playing as well as any defensive back in Seattle secondary right now. You have got to get him on the 53, and you need to start him, I think, the rest of the season. I think he has earned that opportunity. And Mike Macdonald, that's just further emphasis to the locker room that when I say that I'm going to play guys that practice hard and put in the work and prep, I mean it.
Yeah, no question about it. And I think that it's not just about personnel, as you said in the opening of the show. I mean, it's, Mike Macdonald said basically that all things are on the table. Now, one thing that we should stress is that when he mentioned all things are on the table, he also a couple of minutes later was asked about Geno Smith and just kind of said they have all the confidence in the world. So if you were taking that all things are on the table, meaning that Sam Howell is potentially going to be starting against the 49ers or any game soon, barring an injury to number 7, then I think that you are wishing for the wrong things here. I think Geno Smith is clearly who Seattle wants to have at the quarterback position. But I would argue that there could be some schematic and some lineup changes, some alignment changes, not necessarily just personnel. I think anybody who has watched the Seahawks for a long time now knows that it's not typical for the Seahawks to line up and then look towards the sideline to be able to make any kind of adjustments. While I think that is cute and can work at times, I also think that it's slowing down the mental processing that all the players have to make, that they are thinking too much rather than hitting. And so I do think that there's got to be some simplification of whatever is going on the offensive side of the ball to try to get the Seahawks, especially at the front, at the line of scrimmage, get them, again, coming off the ball rather than thinking about where they're going to be going when they come off the ball.
And I'm going to close out from a schematic standpoint. This is just what I think they should do. You and I talked about this when Ryan Grubb was hired. Most of his college career, he leaned heavily on zone concepts. And right now, that's where things are at with this football team. It is not working. You've got some big boys in Lake and Tomlinson. You've got, I think Christian Haynes should be playing, but if Bradford's going to play, he is a 330-plus pound dude that is better off just flying out of his stance and blowing people up. I think Abe Lucas, when he's healthy, that is his game. He is a physical player. And I think Charles Cross this year has shown that he can do the gap scheme stuff a little bit. I think you got to lean on the gap game. Go back to your counter trays, your powers, your traps. That is where I think the run game, and you tell Ken Walker III, hey, we're not running the zone stuff as much. This is more reliant on you. You get downhill and let's play football. It might be a better fit for Zach Charbonnet at times, but you got to do whatever you can do to help this offensive line. And I think that is a way that you can schematically, by leaning more on those concepts, they're going to allow those guys to just play kind of that slobber knocker football that I think that is probably a better fit for this offensive line. We'll see what ends up happening, but personnel is what I'm probably going to be watching most closely to see if some of these players that are playing well continue to get opportunities that they have earned for Mike Macdonald and his coaching staff. Up next, we've got midseason awards, our superlatives on the defensive side of the football. We'll get to those coming up next here on our Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. Get ready to take on the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets in the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You can bet on everything from Ken Walker III scoring a receiving touchdown against the 49ers coming up in Week 11, or DK Metcalf returning from injury to be the first player at Levi Stadium with a 30-plus yard reception. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Wednesday edition of Locked On Seahawks. I'm your host, Corbin Smith. Glad to be teaming up with my co-host in crime, Rob Rang. And a special thanks to all the 12s who are tuning in. And thank you, as always, for making Locked On Seahawks your first listen 5 days a week. We greatly appreciate it. We are at the midway point. I guess you could call it that in the 17-game schedule. The Seahawks have played 9. They're on a bye week. They've got 8 games left after that. We dished out our midseason superlatives on offense yesterday. It's time to go to the defensive side of the football. And Rob, our categories, we're going to be kicking it off here with the unheralded star. And on offense, we kind of had a hard time picking that one. On defense, it was hard for me because there's 3 or 4 names that immediately popped out.
Yeah, and for me, I went with Julian Love, just because, as we were talking about a couple of moments ago, with this spectacular play recently of Kobe Bryant, who I actually have as my most improved player. But I think that sometimes we focus so much on Rayshawn Jenkins' 102-yard touchdown return, or the big hits from Kobe Bryant, the interception, things like that. Julian Love, to me, has been the most consistent defender for the Seahawks, and again, maybe it's because he's as far away from the line of scrimmage, where the Seahawks obviously have struggled so far this season. But still, I think that Julian Love has been just a steady Eddie type of a player for them, for a defense that, of course, has had as many peaks and valleys as it has. I think, again, Julian Love's consistency and Kobe Bryant's improvement have been two of the relative silver linings to some pretty dark clouds on defense.
Look, I'm going to go with the player we've already talked about extensively today. Josh Jobe, to me, has been an unheralded star. I mean, look, what do corners get applauded for most? It's making impact plays. And Josh Jobe has done that in every single game that he has played for the Seahawks to this point, more so than Devin Witherspoon. I thought Witherspoon played one of his better games this year on Sunday. I thought he was very active against the run. He had a pass breakup, was able to do a lot of really fun things in that game. But Josh Jobe has as many pass breakups as both he and Reek Woolen have this season. He's got an interception, which Devin Witherspoon does not have. He nearly took that back for a touchdown. 17 tackles. He's missed a couple, but he's been pretty darn consistent against the run. He had a couple tackles on Sunday that he set a really nice edge at the outside cornerback spot, came up and whacked Kyron Williams. To me, Josh Jobe is not just playing like a fill-in. I think he is playing like a really good starter in the secondary for these last three games. So to me, he's the unheralded star. I mean, can you imagine where they would be at these last three games if he had not played with some of the plays that he has made for them in the secondary? So, yeah, I'm going to go. Some people might say this left field, but if you watch the last three games, Josh Jobe is playing really good football. Okay, let's go to most improved. And you already actually kind of semi-announced your pick, but why is Kobe Bryant your most improved selection?
Well, I think that, anybody who's been watching Seahawks football for a while now knows that Kobe Bryant has been a playmaker from the jump. I mean, whether it be a corner, whether it be a nickel, free safety is a whole different position. And you just have to be able to read the play as it's happening, and really be able to attack downhill aggressively, but also be able to turn, flip your hips, and be able to play that deep coverage. And as you talked about earlier in today's show, Corbin, with just the Earl Thomas beeline he made to break up that play with Demarcus Robinson and the Rams. I mean, that is a play that I haven't seen Kobe Bryant make in the past, going back to when he won the Thorpe Award at Cincinnati as a cornerback. That's just a completely different style of play. We've seen him punch the ball out and things like that, but I wasn't sure that Kobe Bryant was going to be able to make this quick of a transition to free safety, and yet he has. So to me, I have him for most improved. You mentioned Josh Jobe before. To me, even though I gave him a third-round grade when he was coming out of Alabama a couple of years ago, I still would list him as my biggest surprise at this point, just because I didn't think that he'd be able to make as many impactful plays as he has so far.
Yeah, for my most improved, I'm going Derek Hall. Now, it's been a few games since he's had a sack. There's been a couple roughing the passer penalties. I thought the one this last weekend was terrible, but that's beside the point. I love the aggressiveness that he's played with this year. He has consistently been able to get after quarterbacks. He returned a fumble for a touchdown. I mean, Derek Hall has turned into an above-average starter at worst. There have been some games where he's looked like more than that. The last few games, those edge rushers have been slowed down a little bit, but I still think Derek Hall, he has improved as much as any player on Seattle's entire roster, and he's really turned into a starter caliber player that's really fitting well in Mike Macdonald's defense. As far as my biggest surprise, I had to think this one over a little bit because, Josh Jobe would be easy to pick for that one, but I already had him down as the unheralded star. I'm going to put Kobe Bryant as my biggest surprise. And it's because I didn't think going into the season that he was going to make this roster when we talked in August. And this was not a shot at his skill. I just thought there were too many bodies in front of it. Yep. But he's gotten this opportunity, and you can see the football instincts. He is not the fastest, quickest guy on the field, but he mitigates that with his incredible football knowledge. And you can see it. That's why he's making plays like that one where he was on that beeline. Like, he read that immediately and took a perfect angle to it in coverage, smacked the receiver, knocked the ball out. probably ends the game there if that ball is caught. The Rams could just kick the field goal in regulation. But he made that splendid play. We're seeing it in the run game. Just a very heady player that is really playing way better than I expected. And it just feels like you're waiting for a game where he falls back to earth and he just keeps getting better. And that's just a testament to the work that he is putting in on the practice field. All right, biggest disappointment. I know there's a few candidates for this, and this defense has not been great all season. There's certainly been some bad games. Who or what has been the biggest disappointment for you?
Yeah, and I went with what rather than who, because I think that there have been a number of players that have been disappointments. And I want to be fair. Like if I was going to mention a Devin Witherspoon, who I think is the number 5 overall pick, and all of the splashy plays that he made a year ago, I think you can make an argument that he could be the biggest disappointment. But again, I don't think that's fair because I think he's still a very, very good football player. Just the expectations for him were just sky high. I think you can make the same kind of an argument for, say, a Tyrell Dodson, considering that he was going to be Seattle's linebacker. At least some of us thought that he was going to wind up being one of the tackle leaders in all of the NFL, as he was for a small sample set with the Buffalo Bills. Again, I'm not so sure that's fair considering the transition that he's being asked to make. I'll just say this. I think it's the lack of run defense as a whole for this squad. That was one of the things that I felt very confident that Mike Macdonald's system and the bodies that Seattle was bringing in at linebacker along the defensive line, just the size and physicality they bring at the safety position as well. I really thought that run defense was going to make a market improvement from a year ago, and that obviously has not been the case.
Yeah, my biggest disappointment at this point, before Ernest Jones got here, it was the linebacking group. And you mentioned Tyrell Dodson. It just didn't feel like the middle linebacker spot was working well for him. And Jerome Baker had so many missed tackles in the games that he was healthy. There were times he got caught up on blocks. It felt like that was the biggest thing that was holding this team back run defense wise. They had other issues, but their players at the second level, the linebackers in particular, were struggling. Now, Ernest Jones looks like he's going to be a game changer on that front, but they just haven't gotten consistently solid play either in run defense or in coverage from their off-ball linebackers. So to me, that's been the biggest disappointment because going to the season and even week 1, it felt like this could be a group that really is way better than we thought. And Tyrese Knight had some good plays for a couple of weeks, but it just seemed like ever since they got into this stretch where they've lost 5 out of 6, there's been a lot of really questionable play at that linebacker spot. So the Seahawks went out and addressed it. You're hoping in the second half, having Ernest Jones out there plays out like we saw on Sunday, where both he and Tyrell Dodson both played pretty darn good football, and the Seahawks run defense was much improved as a result. Real quick, we got 2 more here. Our top rookie and play of the midseason. As far as play of the midseason goes for me, Rob, on the defensive side of the football, it's got to be Boye Mafe's strip sack that Derek Hall returned for a touchdown. The teamwork between 2 budding stars at the edge rusher positions, and that really put the dagger in the Atlanta Falcons on the road a few weeks ago, the only win that they've had since the beginning of October. So that was a defensive play that I think they're going to be talking about the entire year, and maybe it was kind of a coming-of-age play for those 2 players. And my top rookie, there's really no other candidate than Byron Murphy II, even missing 3 games. He has been a huge difference maker with the run defense aside from the Buffalo game. You're seeing the disruptive ability, the penetrating ability, winning on double teams, stack and shed. And I think you're going to start seeing some pass rush stuff in the second half come from Byron Murphy II.
Yeah, you basically took the words right out of my mouth. I 100% agree with you as far as the defensive play of the season so far. Obviously, Byron Murphy II and the splashes that we have seen from him. I think that he is clearly Seattle's top rookie as expected. We talked before about Kobe Bryant's big hit. That felt so close to being a play that could be one of those types of candidates. Of course, the fact that the Seahawks ended up losing that game to the LA Rams, whereas opposed to the victory on the road against the Atlanta Falcons. That to me is the reason why I would have to list that play. The Boye Mafe and his closing speed to be able to get Kirk Cousins and Derek Hall having the wherewithal to be able to pick up that ball and actually get into the end zone for the Seahawks in that victory. I think that's got to be the defensive player of the game or the defensive play of the season so far.
As always, you can follow me on X and Threads at Corbin Smith NFL. You can follow Rob at Rob Rang. Make sure to subscribe to Locked On Seahawks on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast to make sure you don't miss a single episode. Coming up tomorrow, I'm going to be riding solo on our Thursday show. I've got my extensive midseason grade card. Every single position group, offense, defense, special teams, going to be dishing it out. And going back to my teaching days from a football perspective, make sure that you are listening in and enjoy the rest of your Wednesday. Go Hawks.